And Brett joins us here again in the KRQE News 13 digital studio, here for another Behind the Story interview, and welcome back.
Chris, it is great to be back so soon.
Yes, because you got another investigation. But before we get into it, I always now at this point, after doing a few of these segments, like to give people an idea, a quick explanation about what this is if you're just tuning in for the first time. These are kind of these behind the story conversation segments that we like to do with our investigative reporters. And Gabby, Larry Barker, it's a chance for us to talk a little bit more about the stories that our investigative reporters work on, the process of how they did it, what went into the work behind this. Sometimes there's a lot of data gathering, and just to answer a few more questions around it. So, Anne, your latest investigation here, looking deeper into what we might expect with the upcoming recreational cannabis industry. For those who maybe haven't seen the story yet, what was the goal of the story here, and how did you approach this, or really how did you go about putting this together?
Well, we know recreational cannabis is legal. April 1st is approaching, and that is the date when it can be sold in stores legally. So we just kind of started having that conversation. The state is approaching. How can we, look into this a little further? And one of the things we thought about is driving into work. A lot of us here at the station have seen these recreational cannabis shops popping up. You kind of see the signage starting to go in. And so the thought was, are we going to see these everywhere? Where are these going to be located? How are the retail licenses? How is that process going with issuing those, specifically here in Albuquerque, but of course across our state as well. And then we found out there isn't a limit to how many retail licenses can be issued by the state, and then just kind of looked into what that meant. Of course, one of the big questions, are we going to see these on every corner? Because there are a lot of vacant buildings here in Albuquerque, also across our state. So are those people just going to be moving into those? What are we going to see? Kind of similar to, we've heard complaints in the past about smoke shops, right? That there's like one on every corner. So just looking into, is that a possibility? What are we going to start hearing from the community come April 1?
Yeah, well, and it's a good point. I know just even driving around Albuquerque right now, you'll see, storefronts that appear to be in preparation for the upcoming industry, as you mentioned a little bit there. And so I did want to start with kind of where we are right now. And you had some graphics featured in the end of the story. And quick plug, for those who maybe haven't seen the story yet, you can catch it on krqe.com/investigations. That's where Anne, Gabby, and even Larry Barker's work all kind of gets aggregated right there. And of course, you can also see more behind the story segments there on krqe.com/investigations. So again, at the end of your story, you have these graphics here, and we can share some of them on screen as long as I can remember which buttons I attached them to. But here we go. This was one of them. 404 applications for licenses right now. But not all of those are the same type of license, right? Can you tell me, how does this break down? You picked a specific number to look at here.
Yes, so that is statewide, and that's chatting with the Cannabis Control Division. Of course, this number is changing every day as more and more people are hoping to get involved, get a stake in this. So this is from growing to selling. There are 6 different types of licenses. So 404 applications for licenses, those 6 types of licenses, and again, that's statewide. And then we broke it down further. Of course, the focus of this investigation was retail licenses. So we broke that number down further. Again, this number is changing every day, but this is as of Friday, February 11th. 138 retail license applications were in, again, statewide. And then we looked at, how many of those have been approved? And that number out of 138 is just 20 that have been issued so far. So, of course, with that April 1 date approaching, we will likely only see 20 shops opening statewide April 1. As of right now, of course, they're working diligently.
Right, still time.
The Cannabis Control Division telling me, their staff is really working overtime to process these and go through everything. But as previous stories have told, these are extensive. They really do involve a lot, these applications. So, but the RLD, I wanted to point that out. Their staff, not only working overtime trying to, approve these, but also just assuring that everybody is doing everything properly, getting everything done that you need to as well. So really trying to help out with that.
Yeah. So a lot of applications in, not many of them processed in terms of talking about the retail licenses that have actually been issued yet. And as you mentioned, a lot of rules to catch up on, follow with. One thing I felt that was an interesting point, it's right off the top in your story, right, was that theoretically with the state rules, there's no limit on the number of cannabis shops that could be licensed by the state. So far, just 20 of them, but there's no limit. Was that element surprising to anybody you spoke with in the process of putting the story together, that it is a situation where there is no limit on the amount of retail licenses that could be issued?
Surprising, I guess I'd say yes and no. I think a lot of people just hadn't really thought about it. They, like us, are starting to see these storefronts get filled, if you will, with some of that signage, with the hope of turning those vacant buildings or maybe even medical marijuana shops. Hopefully they're also, some of them are hoping to also become recreational cannabis shops as well. But I think the majority, people had this kind of positive outlook, if you will, that, okay, sure, there might not be a limit, but there is a process to getting there and to approving these licenses. Kind of as we just showed, there isn't a limit, but so far there are only 20 approved. But also the thought of, okay, so say, by let's say June, there are 300 approved. Right. Are those going to be on every street corner by July, by December even? Somebody telling me, this is going to be just like any other business. The ones that are good, that are following the rules, that are, where the consumer wants to go, those are going to be the ones that stick around. And so kind of just that positive outlook of, it's a little interesting, right, that there's no limit. Right. But what does that really mean? Yeah.
And any idea of why the state chose to go this route? Because I know at least in the past, if we think about liquor licenses for the state, there used to be a rule with a finite amount of liquor licenses. So when you think about controlled product in this case, like there is some history there, but just to ask you, any idea of why the state maybe chose to go this route with cannabis licenses, that there is an unlimited amount that could be issued retail-wise there?
Yeah, that liquor rule still in effect, that there is a limit on how many licenses can be issued for liquor stores. So specific to recreational cannabis stores, again, no limit. The state, the CCD, I spoke with Victor Reyes, who's the deputy superintendent of the RLD, and who kind of oversees, right, this Cannabis Control Division. And he mentioned to me, honestly, that it's just to make sure that anybody who wants to take advantage of this opportunity, who wants to be a part of this new industry, can be. It was kind of an equal opportunity thing. But then, the fine print here, those limitations do come in city by city. Yeah. So the Cannabis Regulation Act gives each individual local government the discretion to choose time, place, and manner. So that's kind of where we're seeing those limitations take effect. So sure, the state might be able to dish out as many as they want, but then it depends on which city you're choosing for kind of where those limits come in.
Yeah, so with that in mind, there is a possibility, it is feasible that we could see cannabis shops, one right next door to the other. But that's really, of course, reminding ourselves that a business needs business to survive and exist, and that cities as well can step in and set rules, as you had mentioned.
Yeah. and we won't see them next door to each other here in Albuquerque specifically.
Right.
They have already set their rules that no recreational cannabis shop can be within 600 feet of another. And then there was just a resolution introduced. Okay, well then who gets dibs here? And that would be the first person to get approved gets priority, I guess, gets
Right.
dibs over the other ones. So here in Albuquerque, you're not going to see them closer than 600 feet to each other.
And there's some other rules that are in play as well that we should get to here, at least on the books right now. You had mentioned the proposal with Ike Benton, Councilor Ike Benton having that proposal. You'd mentioned, though, that currently on the books, retail shops must be 600 feet apart. There's another one related to schools there, right?
Yes, schools and daycare. Recreational cannabis shops cannot be within 300 feet of a school or daycare. So, of course, yes, the state can issue as many licenses as they want, but then the state says it's on the applicant to look at the city's rules where they are hoping to open this shop prior to applying to make sure that they are in compliance with their city, which these are two of the big ones. Again, not being within 600 feet of another one that's already been approved, of course. It has to have already been approved because the first one approved gets dibs within that 600 feet, and then not within 300 feet of a school or daycare. And then also specific in Albuquerque, Old Town is not allowing any cannabis retail shops. That's already been, that's already on the books as well.
Okay. I know you focused on Albuquerque here, but just from a high level, are there other municipalities that you know of out there that are considering rules and or maybe have implemented rules that you can maybe tell us off the top of your head?
This is just a big conversation, it appears still. It's a tough one for cities. I know I spoke with Corrales back in December, and their concern being that their like area for where a commercial business can be is really small. And then they've got these zones for agriculture. So, and that's like where people live, right? That's where houses are. They just didn't really change it to a residential. They kept it as agriculture. So there's been a big discussion in that city, just kind of going back and forth of, well, are we violating the rule if we don't allow more than just the main drag through the city where most businesses are? Do we need to be allowing businesses to open in our residential, our agricultural zone areas?
Yeah.
So I think a lot of these cities and towns, they are working on these rules, and it's just, it appears to somewhat be a frustration, right? Because it's on them. And then, of course, they've got the community input and all of that. So just this, it's tough, I think, on them to kind of determine all that. And, of course, take in the community and what they want to see. So
yeah, I did want to mention as well, I know you have this visual in your story, and we can take a little bit closer of a look at it here. You were able to map out all of the places in Albuquerque so far where applications have been put in, it sounds like, for cannabis retail licenses. So I'll put this up full screen now so we can see this as a Google Earth map, so a little bit interactive.
Yeah, let me tell you how I did this.
Yeah.
So you can go on the state's website and see retail license applications. You can see any cannabis license applications, whether it's for retail or growing, producing. And so I clicked on each individual application to then see, okay, because they had to put in there, right, the address for where they were hoping to open up that brick and mortar, that actual retail shop.
Right.
And then I plotted that. And that was honestly just to kind of give the viewer, right, an actual look at where could we see these? Could they be in your neighborhood? Could they be on the corner? Are there 5, applications into, I'll put it on the same block.
Yeah.
And then from there, and knowing the 600-foot rule, I kind of zoomed in a little bit closer to see, okay, some of these pins are close to each other.
Right.
Is that within 600 feet or not? And some of them we found in the same strip mall, right?
Yeah.
And then just a few 3 doors down from each other. So
Yeah.
again,
This is
whoever
that
gets
downtown.
approved first. Yeah, and that's I
This is
believe
the downtown area right
yes.
here. You can kind of see the country club right there outlined in the
And
big
those are
green
all,
swath.
I mean, 600 feet, when you think about it, it isn't that big of a space. It's not that far. So, yeah, none of these we saw really were in violation, but it was up kind of near Montgomery, San Mateo, that area, where we really saw those pins close together. Of
Yeah.
course, again, these are where people are hoping to open up a shop. These are the addresses listed on applications to open a retail store.
Yeah, you mentioned San Mateo and Montgomery. That's one right here where
Yeah,
there's
just right
clearly
across the
two
street
right
from each
across
other.
the street from each other,
Yeah.
and then also
And that one I think is actually in our story. We got those two
Yeah.
addresses.
here's another one right on that corner of Montgomery and San Pedro here, pretty much across San Pedro from each other with just one building in between.
And there is, I should say, you can apply to be closer if you're a micro business. Just another kind of layer with this city of making sure that you're getting the proper approval. And I should mention in our web story, which you're looking at, there is a link to the city's breakdown of how to apply to open up a retail shop, and then what the rules are, mentioning the 300-foot rule, the 600-foot rule, no stores in Old Town. So that's also very helpful, and that just launched, I want to say, towards the end of last week.
Okay.
So
yeah, well, that's good, and yeah, people can check out the story. We always post with the segments as well. We'll post a link to the story in the web article for this segment. People can check that out there as well. This goes to one of the points as well that you made in the story, which was just kind of gathering people's thoughts and opinions about what it's going to be like to be seeing a few of these retail businesses. And I just wanted to maybe get a little bit more into this as we kind of think about what is to come. You have an interview there from Laurel Kehoe, who owns this optical shop, saying that they even started carrying guns as a result of the problems nearby with a medical marijuana shop. I know personally from covering a news story just sometime in the last 2 years how medical marijuana shops have often in the past been targets of crime. So getting a little bit more to her perspective, I know it is one perspective, but what was really the takeaway that you got from it? It sounded like she had a lot of fear for what it would be like to be a neighboring business to a recreational cannabis shop.
yeah, and you know what? A lot of the people we spoke with, we're happy to see, something going into the vacant building next to them.
Right.
Excited for the prospect of a new business, of a new industry. But she certainly, she had already had the experience. These other business owners had not. And the optical clinic that she and her husband own butts up to a shopping center. It's on Montgomery. There used to be a medical marijuana shop in there, and she said they got broke into. Their employees were held at gunpoint. She just said there was just a lot of crime over there, and the hours too, and big crowds. And so what they ended up doing, actually, worried about their own safety and security, is they put a gate around the perimeter of their business, taking that step to put up a whole fence. They also started carrying weapons, and they, like most businesses, made sure to take all the money, anything like that, anything valuable, home with them at the end of the day, worried about who could be breaking into their shop. So yeah, it was interesting to hear. And of course, that medical marijuana shop did close, I think she said, about 2 years ago because of the issues that they had. And so, she felt relieved. And then when I let her know that there was an application in to turn that now vacant building business into a recreational cannabis shop, she was a little worried, just kind of wondering of what's to come, of course.
Wow. Well, yeah, I think it's interesting and important that we share these stories because it's a good precursor into seeing and helping us measure what is actually happening out there in the community.
And to your point, mentioning medical marijuana shops and kind of what you've seen and how that's evolved, right? The market right sizes itself, just as we were saying earlier, how there is no limit and we could potentially see these on every corner. They also will eventually close if they're not getting that business or if they're having those problems. So while we might see plenty popping up, if those applications for licenses get approved in the coming weeks or months, I think within a year there could be fewer of them. So yeah, we'll just have to see.
Yeah, and along those lines of when we might expect, sort of what we're talking about with that bottom graphic there, the incoming cannabis retail wave, was anybody able to maybe give you a kind of an idea of, obviously there have been 20 retail license applications approved in New Mexico so far as of essentially now mid-February, and we expect April 1st is the day that is going to be the opening, the grand opening, if you will, for this new law. But did anyone give you maybe a timetable of when that sort of a flurry of businesses might be more so out there? Because, part of this is a stopgap of regulators getting approvals out and making sure that those applying for approvals are meeting all of the rules that they need to. It's a little less than 2 months away, and only 20 retail applications have been approved statewide, whereas there have been 138, again, a reminder, that have been applied for. So, again, the question just being, was anybody able to give you a timetable on maybe when this retail flurry might be, whether that's mid to late summer, fall, something like that?
Victor Reyes with the RLD, which oversees the Cannabis Control Division, he mentioned, he is expecting a whole lot more. Like I mentioned, it is an extensive application. I think it's difficult. It does cost money to get these licenses, but he is expecting, just because there is such an interest in this new industry, he's expecting quite a few more. The problem they're running into, as I mentioned, the staff already working overtime trying to help people through these applications who are having trouble, who aren't maybe able to get the fire inspector out to look at the proposed building that they have. Just kind of dotting the I's, crossing the T's, right? With all of that. They have staff that are helping those people. That staff is also having to approve them. That staff is, there's so much that they're having to do. They're already working overtime. So he actually asked, and we did do a story on this maybe 2 weeks ago, that they have asked for money in this new budget. Of course, the legislature is still in session right now, because they need to more than double their staff to kind of speed up that process. I wouldn't be surprised if the reason why there are only 20 approved is because there just isn't enough manpower behind that. Yeah. So he feels that they're in a good spot. He mentioned that to me. He said, they're moving at a good pace, but they would like to pick it up. So, and beyond, just having staff members, and again, more than doubling that staff, they also need compliance officers who will then be going in and inspecting and checking in on all these businesses, the license holders, to make sure that they are in compliance with the law, with the rules. So,
well, Ann, great discussion. I appreciate it, and I think your story is illuminating again in terms of what we're expecting from the retail scene as recreational cannabis gears up. How can people reach you if they got a question, comment, or suggestion?
You can always email me at ann.perrett@krqe.com, and then it's Ann Perrett on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram.
Okay. Ann, thanks again.
Thank you.